right, we're going to stand up and it's time to head over to our activities. Head on over.
We'll turn to our Bible readings now. And first reading is Job 1. So settle in for just a little bit of a time and hear these words, the words of God. In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, and had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. His sons used to hold feasts in their homes on their birthdays, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would make arrangements for them to be purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, "Perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." This was Job's regular custom. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There was no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." "Does Job fear God for nothing?" Satan replied. "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." The Lord said to Satan, "Very well, then. Everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. One day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabeans attacked and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, "The fire of God fell from the heavens and burned up the sheep and the servants. I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." While he was speaking, another messenger came and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, "Your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you." At this, Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground and worshipped and said, "Naked I come from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." In all of this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. This is the word of the Lord. Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks, Mike, and good morning, everyone. We're going to hear more of the story of Job, so be ready for that. But let me set the scene a bit. Last week, Daniel Gabert opened his sermon on spiritual warfare by talking about movies that depict the epic battle between good and evil. He referenced Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Star Wars, and he pointed out that one of the defining marks of those movies was that they present a worldview in which good and evil are real polarities and are personified. Now, that's a great style of movie. There's a lot of them. But there's another type of story, another style of movie that we sometimes encounter. Have you ever watched a movie that kind of left you unsettled, left you wrestling with those deeper questions of life, questions about suffering, questions about justice? Often these movies present a story in which the lines are a little more blurred between good and evil, hero and villain. In some cases, the apparent hero turns out to be the villain. Think, and I'm not sure what your movie tastes are, but think Fight Club, Memento, or even Batman's The Dark Knight's very own Harvey Dent, who actually says you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. So there are movies that kind of blur the lines a little bit. And then, of course, there's movies that have that surprising twist at the end. Think The Sixth Sense, unless you saw it coming, or The Usual Suspects. Who is Kaiser Soze? You can think of a lot of them. The great filmmakers, your Christopher Nolans, Quentin Tarantino's, the Coen brothers, they craft stories that make us think. They're sometimes confusing, they're often unsettling, but they're always thought-provoking. The book of Job is that kind of story. It's unsettling. It doesn't wrap everything up neatly, and it refuses to give easy answers. So I figure if some of the books of the Bible are like a Spielberg movie, they're kind of epic and uplifting and clear in their moral direction, Job is more like your Christopher Nolan film. It leaves you disoriented, it's questioning what you thought you knew, trying to piece together a bigger truth from incomplete information. So over the next 5 weeks or so, we're going to be working our way through the book of Job, which means today is all about the setup. I think I get the easy bit. Broadly speaking, the theme of the book of Job is the problem of suffering. But what exactly do we mean by the problem of suffering? I guess we ask different questions about it. For some people, the question is, why does suffering happen? And we can ask that on a big scale. What's the origin of suffering? What's the cause? Or sometimes it's a more personal question. For what reason has this particular suffering happened to me? Now, these questions are asked in the book of Job. Asked, but, I'll give you a warning, not answered. If you're looking for the answer to why am I suffering, you may not find that in the book of Job. The question Job wrestles with across the whole book is, how can I suffer? What am I to do when I am suffering? So today, I'm just going to take us through the first 2 chapters, which kind of lay out the storyline and see what questions it raises. And there's not going to be any pearls of wisdom today. There's going to be a whole lot of questions. And when we get to the end, it'll be unsatisfactory. So I'll just call that now. So here's the setup. And stay in your movie zone. It's the opening scene. Grab your popcorn, settle in. I almost brought popcorn. I thought about it. Settle into your seats. The curtains are widening. The feature film is about to begin. And it's our opening scene, and we meet Job, our seemingly picture-perfect protagonist. He's wealthy, as we've just heard. He's wealthy, he's righteous, he's faithful. 7 sons, 3 daughters, sheep, camels, oxen, donkeys, servants. He's got everything. It says he was the greatest man among all the people of the East. It's almost too perfect. Everything is so idyllic, you just know it's going to fall apart. Already we've got that sense. Helen and I enjoy a bit of trashy crime scene drama. We watch the CSI, NCIS, those sorts of shows. One of the fun games we like to play at the opening scene is to guess whether the people you're introduced to at the start are going to find the corpse or be the corpse. Because it's always going to go one way or the other. That's the formula for those shows. You get the same feeling with Job. We get this setup. This guy has got everything, and we've just met him, and you think, wow, either he's in trouble or he's about to find trouble. Something is not going to go well here. Is he really that good? Is his faith that amazing, or what's the catch? And so we've got the setup, and then the scene changes, the camera shifts, and we're taken behind the curtain to a heavenly scene where God and Satan, or the Satan, which means the accuser, are having a conversation about Job. Aha, something else is going on. It's like a tense, high-stakes scene in a thriller. Think now, shift directors, think Tarantino. 2 characters sit across from each other in a quiet room. But beneath the surface, the whole story is about to explode. The camera zooms in on Satan, the Satan. He smirks and he says, Job, he's only faithful because you've pampered him. And then the camera shifts over to God, calm and unshaken. Let's see if it's true. The bet's on. There's very little context here to explain what is Satan doing in God's presence. Where did this conversation come from? There's no answers there. There's a few things we can helpfully glean from it, but it won't answer everything. We get the sense that God is clearly in command. Satan can do nothing without God's permission. We kind of see that in the conversation. We see that God is supremely confident right from the outset that he is going to win this bet, that Job is a good and faithful man. But we also get the sense that this is not just a test of Job. It's a test of God's entire way of relating to humanity. Is love real if it's never tested? Does faith mean anything if it's only present when life is easy? And here we encounter the first of many accusations in the book of Job. And you'll see, and I'm assuming as other people take up the story, the accusations just keep coming. But here's our first one, delivered by the Satan, the accuser himself. Job doesn't love you, God. He just loves the benefits. God says, well, let's see. Satan accuses Job of having a transactional, shallow faith. So, side note for us, that's a question that gets asked. We might ask that of ourselves. Do we follow God because he's God? Because he makes our life comfortable? I'll just park that one over there. You can play with that as you like. Because then the scene changes. We're back in the movie. We're back to Job. Or more specifically, Job's family. Job's sons and daughters are feasting and drinking wine at the older brother's house. Now, it's just a carry-on from the opening scene. Everything's great, but we've had a little window into behind the scenes. Because of what we, the audience, have just been shown, now there's a sense of foreboding. Something is going to happen, and we know it's not going to be good. And then this horror starts to unfold before us, a sequence of loss that's just cinematic in its delivery. Servant 1, all your oxen and donkey are gone. Servant 2, fire from heaven has burned your sheep. Servant 3, raiders took your camels. Servant 4, your children are dead. Each blow comes without time. I shouldn't have said that so loud, but the kids are fine. They haven't reacted. I just suddenly thought, oh, the kids are in here. Each blow comes, so that took me out of my moment. Each blow comes without time to react. Job is there just being hit with this series of relentless tragedies. It's unfair, it's unexplained, it's devastating. Now, I don't know about you, but I've watched enough movies to know what happens next. I know how the story goes. See, what we should see is an initial response of grief and despair. Then there's that moment of personal reckoning with our hero. Then it's followed by some sort of montage which shows our hero recovering, training, preparing for revenge or comeback, and then the triumphant rise from the ashes. That's how the script goes. I've seen it. Now, Job follows the first bit of this script. He tears his robe, he shaves his head, symbols of deep mourning. But then, just at the point where we're ready for him to go all Liam Neeson on us, like I can picture it in the movie. He calls the scribe over, he says, all those people that destroyed my cattle, destroyed everything, he said, note this down, deliver this message. I don't have much left, but what I do have is a very particular set of skills. Skills I have acquired over a very long career. Skills that, those of you that are chuckling know the movie. It's one of my favourites. There's that line. What is he? That's what I think Job is going to do. Like he's fighting back. He's out for revenge. But no, not our Job. What does he do? He falls to the ground and worships. His response: naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Who does that? In any film, we know to expect anger, revenge, or collapse. In real life, we kind of expect the same. But Job does something counterintuitive. He worships. End of chapter 1. But it doesn't end there. Mike, are you ready to bring us the next instalment, chapter 2? Sorry, we're going the whole story. We're digging in.
Job 2. On another day, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them to present himself before him. And the Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There was no one like him on earth. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil, and he still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason." "Skin for skin," Satan replied. "A man will give all he has for his own life. But now stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Very well, then he is in your hands, but you must spare his life." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. Then Job took a piece of broken pottery and scraped himself with it as he sat amongst the ashes. His wife said to him, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." He replied, "You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. When Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, they sent out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him, because they saw how great his suffering was.
I just remember a moment on a retreat with a bunch of other clergy, and we were having morning prayer, and someone had read a reading, and I can't remember what the passage was, but it was one of those Old Testament readings that's just brutal. It was just horrible. And they read the reading, and then we just lost it on the screen, and then they gave the traditional kind of ending, and they said, "Hear the word of the Lord." And there was this awkward pause, and we all kind of mumbled, "Thanks be to God." And then had this lovely discussion about how sometimes we hear something, we read something in the Bible, and we don't think, "Thanks be to God. Thank goodness that's there." We just think, "That was horrible." So Mike, that was horrible. It's hard to read. It's hard to read. And it seems strangely familiar. We've heard this story before. It's like I was just thinking, it's like one of those movies where, and there's a bunch of different ones like this, where the character just repeats the same thing again and again. It's kind of your Groundhog Day thing, but a bit more sci-fi. Because once again, we're taken behind the curtain and we hear this conversation. "Have you considered my servant Job? There's no one like him. He's blameless. He's wonderful. He fears God. Even when you tried to ruin him, he still maintained his integrity." Satan says, "Nah. I just didn't try hard enough. He's still got his health. You wait. You take that away from him, you see, he'll crumble." It's an escalation. It's not just about Job's wealth and family and it's his own body, his dignity, his existence is being threatened there. And Satan is allowed to strip all of that away until Job is just a miserable mess. This movie's not going great. And then it gets even better. We've got Job's wife enters, another character in the story. And she comes along and now she's got her own accusation. Job's wife says, "Are you still holding on to your faith? Why don't you just curse God and die?" Now there's a bit in that. Suffering can be a lonely journey, regardless of the cause, and often it can feel like others around us, even the closest to us, don't or can't understand what we're going through or why we're responding in a particular way. I think sometimes as Christians we can be as unhelpful as Job's wife was. We see resolve and faith in the face of suffering, and on the one hand it can be inspiring, but also sometimes it can seem kind of naive or a kind of denial, and it makes us uncomfortable. It's also very easy to judge Job's wife for telling him to curse God and die. But let's be honest, her response makes sense. Remember, she's suffered too. She's lost her children. She's lost her security. And now she's watching her husband waste away. Her words may not be noble, but they are deeply human. And we might not say them aloud, but I suspect we've all felt them at some point. That moment where we think, what's the point? Why hold on? Job's wife gives voice to the temptation that we all face in suffering, to let bitterness win, to give up, to believe that God is absent. And yet, still, Job holds on, even as he's beginning to question. And this is probably another lesson we can take away early from Job. Faith is not always about understanding. Sometimes it's just about endurance. I wonder if you've had a moment when those closest to you didn't understand what you were holding on to, or maybe you've seen it in others and not understood. So the movie continues. And the best films know when to pause, have a sense of timing. After intense action, there's that long silent moment. If you've seen Oppenheimer, that silence after the bomb test, it just drags on. Or if you're a bit more old school, the eerie quiet before the showdown in a Western. The little music, the tumbleweed, and that silent moment. It's what we get in Job. We've had the action, the disaster, the misery, and then the friends arrive. And what do? They sit in total silence for 7 days. Now, I should note, at that moment, they're doing the right thing. There's no accusations yet, just presence. In our world, silence is awkward. We rush to fill it with words, with explanations, with solutions. But sometimes the best response to suffering is not an answer, it's presence. So Job's friends start well. They sit in silence with him for 7 days. Imagine that, 7 full days sitting with him. No quick fix, no trite platitudes, no thoughts and prayers, text messages, no I stand with Job Facebook posts or anything. In a noisy world, this is possibly one of the most radical acts of love we can offer someone who's suffering, is to simply be with them. A lesson for us: when someone's in deep pain, do we rush to speak, or do we just sit with them? And so at this point we come to the end of today's passage. We've had the first 2 chapters and we're left wondering what's next. Job's only just beginning to wrestle with his suffering, and so far he's doing it admirably. Now, a few spoilers though. Looking ahead, the accusations are going to continue to fly. Satan's already accused Job. Job's wife has accused him and God. Job's friends have been quiet, but they're about to start accusing him. Even Job eventually is going to start questioning God. The story will continue to unfold, and others will unpack that. But today we're left with more questions than answers. So let me suggest a few questions that you might sit with. When life doesn't make sense, how do you respond? Are you someone who demands answers, or someone who's willing to sit with the discomfort? Are we people that can learn to sit with suffering, both ours and others, without rushing to explain it? And what voices do we listen to in our suffering? God's voice, the accusers, or the ones telling us to give up? And what if the answers don't come right away? Like a good film, Job will unfold in unexpected ways, and our challenge is to sit with that discomfort, not rush to conclusions. This isn't a Hollywood movie with a neat resolution. Job's suffering is real, the accusations are flying, that the story's not over yet, and neither is ours. We are in a season of Lent, a season preparing for Easter. And as we journey through Lent, we remember that Job is not the only innocent sufferer in Scripture. His story echoes forward to another righteous man, one who, like Job, was falsely accused, abandoned by friends, and suffered not because of wrongdoing, but because of faithfulness. Lent is a season of reflection. It's a time when we sit in the tension of suffering, longing for hope. And just as Job asked, "Where is God in my pain?" we'll soon hear Jesus cry from the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And Lent is a season of waiting, of walking through the wilderness. It reminds us that we don't rush to Easter Sunday, although we know it's coming. We pass through the suffering first. Job's in the wilderness. He doesn't yet see the resolution, and we too must sit in that space now. And so it's in that space, but with the glimmer of hope that we know is to come, that I'm going to leave you. Thank you.